The miracle of the economic development of China. China moved from a centrally planned economy to a transition one in 20 years from 1980, but by the end of the 20th century, its GDP had quadrupled and the number of people living in poverty had reduced from 250 million people to 50 million. The average annual growth rate increased by 9% over the growth in population. The country had the same issues as other developing countries, such as high population of 1.4 billion people, but still managed to have higher growth rate than the smaller countries. China's growth had defied the consensus that for development to take place, liberalization of trade, democracy and privatization of the main institutions need to take place. In the case of China, the last two of these criteria did not take place, but substantial growth continues even now, despite the global economic slowdown. Most economists consider China's growth pattern as unconventional, even unusual and unlikely to be the appropriate route to economic development. Part of the explanation for the development of China was put down as the role played by foreign direct investment, FDI. In this case, the role of the Chinese people living in Hong Kong and Taiwan who sent money back to mainland China, but this has been dismissed as the main reason for the increased level of growth. Another reason attributed to the rapid growth in development was the agricultural reform of the 1980s. This led to better productivity. In the 1970s, over 70% of China's labor force was employed in the agricultural sector. This reduced to 50% by 2000, but growth in other non-agricultural sectors absorbed the employment lost in the agricultural sector. The same is true for the savings made from higher productivity and agriculture being invested in the industrial sector. The most important catalysts for change in China were the institutional reforms to provide economic and political benefits. Meier and Rauch, 2005. China also moved from a system that was centrally planned to one that allowed free market forces from 1978 until the 1990s, when subsidies were finally removed. In some instances, the provision of coupons allowed people to buy essential food in towns and cities where these items were too expensive for those on low income to afford, the same with subsidized foreign exchange allocation. China also used town-village enterprises, TVE, to encourage innovation and entrepreneurship. The TVEs were locally owned and for the benefit of the community. The growth of the TVEs subsequently led to their privatization later. The popularity of their privatization also led to the rapid development of more private enterprises, but this eventually led to their decline as TVE managers were enticed by better remuneration to the private sectors. One of the greatest lessons from the transformation of the Chinese economy was the process of using transitional and in some instances dual processes to reduce opposition, and in many instances offering compensation for those affected by any new reforms. This led to the acceptance of the new processes, but at the same time such approaches avoided spectacular failures mostly associated with some of the other policies. Some researchers believe that the economic reforms which led to entrepreneurs starting their own businesses, creating employment, producing consumer goods and ending state monopoly are the main reasons for China's economic development.